Good evening. Welcome to the very first episode of This Week in Turkey. Here at Medyascope, we'll do our best every week to bring you the latest news and developments from Turkey. We'll be on air every Friday at 9 p.m. Turkish time. Turkey is going to the ballot box on April 16th to decide whether it will amend its constitution.
The constitutional referendum will be held on Sunday, 16th April 2017. Voters will vote on a set of 18 proposed amendments to the Constitution of Turkey. The amendments have long been suggested by the governing AKP and its leader, President Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, as well as being agreed to by the opposition Nationalist Movement Party, the MHP. After being signed by the AKP's 316 MPs, the 18 proposals were presented to the Parliament for ratification. Constitutional amendments need a 3/5 majority to be put forward to a referendum and the 2/3 majority to be ratified directly. Parliamentary voting began on 19th January, and the final motion to enact the approved amendments was approved by 339 votes, surpassing the 330 vote threshold to hold a referendum, but falling short of the 367 vote threshold needed to enact the amendments directly. The amendments include the introduction of an executive presidency that would replace the existing parliamentary system of government, the abolition of the office of the Prime Minister, the raising of the number of seats in parliament from 550 to 600, the lowering of the age requirement to stand as a candidate in an election from 25 to 18, changes in the Supreme Board of Judges and Prosecutors, and the abolition of military courts. According to the new amendments, presidential and parliamentary elections will be held on the same day every 5 years, and the president, who is elected directly by the people for a 5-year term, will be allowed to act as the leader of a political party, and the elected president can be re-elected for only 1 more term. By the abolition of the office of Prime Minister and the cabinet, the president becomes the sole executive authority. The president becomes both the head of the state and head of the government, with the power to appoint and sack ministers and vice presidents. And these appointments will not need a parliamentary approval. The president will have the power to issue executive decrees, declare a state of emergency, and dissolve the parliament. However, the execution of decrees and state of emergency will be subject to the ratification of the parliament. Also, the budget will be prepared by the president and presented to the parliament. The amendments also include new regulations about checks and balances between the branches of the government. The supervisory power of the legislative branch over the executive branch is considerably curtailed. Under the proposed draft, vice presidents and ministers will be no longer responsible to the parliament, but the president.
Our guest in the studio today is Professor Ali Çarkoğlu. Welcome, Professor
Hi.
Çarkoğlu. Ali Çarkoğlu is a professor of political science and also the dean of the Faculty of Administrative Sciences and Economics at Koç University. He's a prominent scholar in the field of Turkish politics and voting behavior, and he recently published a paper on Turkey's upcoming presidential referendum. So, Professor Çarkoğlu, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Taking into account those viewers who may not be 100% familiar with Turkish politics, I'd like to start by asking you a very straightforward question. This referendum seems to have polarized the Turkish society much more than ever on any issue.
Sure.
But there seems to be a different struggle here between two camps, one that goes beyond the constitutional vote or the referendum. So what, in your opinion, is the main driving force of this struggle?
Well, it will be yet another step towards consolidating the power of the Justice and Development Party. The process has started 2002, and ever since the party has gained considerable amount of support. They started out with 38%. With minor fluctuations, now they are almost at 50%. In the last election, they got around 48-49% of the vote. So if the presidential system, they don't call it presidential system, but a version of presidential system, a la Turca, I would say, then it will be a consolidation of not only the AKP's power, but also personally the power of the founder and the leader of the party, the current president, Recep Tayyip Erdogan. So the opposition uses this yet another as an occasion to resist the rise and consolidation of the AKP, and in an alarming way, arguing that this will be not only a consolidation, but also the end of the parliamentary regime, wherein the parliament will cease to have any power. That's the claim of the opposition, and if you listen to the full scale of their argument, they also argue that this will be a turn towards a more authoritarian, oppressive regime in the country, whereas the ruling party claims that this is not a regime change, but rather a system change, which will allow the ruling party to rule much more easily and effectively. So those are the two camps' arguments. And are we more polarized today than ever? Mm-hmm. Well, that's, I think,
debatable?
Debatable, yes.
Okay. Well, talking about polarization, now we'll hear more about that matter in particular. So we're moving on with our next video. The proposed changes to the Turkish constitution have radically polarized the Turkish voters, as we've just spoken about it. Now we'll hear the different stances held by different political parties on Turkey's upcoming referendum.
On April 16th, Turkey is going to the ballot box to decide whether to amend the constitution. So, who is in favor of changing the constitution and who is against the amendments? There are four major political parties represented in Turkey's National Assembly. The ruling AKP and the far-right Nationalist Movement Party, MHP, are planning a nationwide vote yes campaign for the constitutional referendum. However, according to the recent polls, many nationalist voters don't agree with the MHP administration. Besides, some AKP voters also have doubts. Dissidents within the MHP, as well as those within the main opposition party, the Republican People's Party, CHP, and the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, HDP, will be running a vote no campaign. However, it remains uncertain whether the majority of Kurdish voters will go to the ballot box. On the other end, the Islamist far-right Felicity Party has also declared that they will vote no in the referendum. Since the Felicity Party could win only 1% of the votes in the 2015 general elections, Felicity Party's no campaign is not expected to have a significant effect on the referendum. Another minor political party which has declared its vote for the referendum is the far-right Kurdish Islamist Free Cause Party, abbreviated as Hüdapar. The Free Cause Party has announced that it will support the proposed constitutional amendment package in the upcoming referendum. Overall, polls show that yes and no campaigns are neck and neck. The cracks and doubts among Turkey's conservatives indicate that the executive presidency that President Recep Tayyip Erdogan wants is not in the bag.
So, Professor Çarkoğlu, we just heard about the different stances by different political parties. And one that comes into attention here is the stance of MHP, because there seems to be different opinions between the MHP's administration and its electoral base. While the administration pursues a very open vote yes agenda, the voters remain rather suspicious, partially because of the treatment that the MHP dissidents have faced in the last months. So how do you think this will have an effect on the results of the referendum?
Well, MHP's decision to support the constitutional amendments have been a surprise to many. However, the article that you mentioned, which we wrote together with Selim Erdem Aytaç and Kerem Yıldırım, we found that over the process of two consecutive elections in 2015, about a year and a half ago, the MHP constituency has slowly moved towards not only presidentialism, but also towards the AKP. So in a sense, the AKP leadership, in our argument, as diagnosed finally after November elections in 2015, that its constituency is slipping under their feet and moving towards a supportive position of presidentialism, and also moving towards supporting the AKP. That was also evident in the loss of support that MHP, the nationalists, have incurred from June to November in the last year's election. So, plus, we also had the joint presidential candidate in 2 years ago when we had the presidential elections. The MHP constituency did not predominantly support the joint candidate that nationalists have put together with the left-of-center Republican People's Party, Ekmelettin İhsanoğlu, for instance. And in the post-presidential election analyses, people have argued that MHP voters predominantly supported Erdogan's presidency. So this has been a lack of control of the leadership over its own constituency for 3 elections in a row. So in that sense, the surprise that people have expressed is not actually a surprise. It's finally the leadership have come to the conclusion that they need to follow their constituency's preferences and support the presidential system. So this is the argument that we make. However, when you look at the current debates in day out in Turkish politics, you see a significant group of prominent MHP leaders arguing that they would not vote in favor of presidential system or the amendments that are on the agenda. But to what extent they will be able to mobilize their supporters is a big question mark. So your suggestion that the leadership says yes, but the constituency says no, I think is going to be tested. Our argument is that the constituency will not say no. The constituency will predominantly say yes, contrary to the arguments of the dissident leadership of the MHP. So we'll see. I mean, we have about 2 months to find out which one of these arguments will turn out to be true.
And let's now turn a bit to the Kurdish voters.
Mm-hmm.
One of the main arguments on the Kurdish electoral base has been that they're alienated and indifferent to the referendum. Do you agree with this, and do you think they will be going to the ballot box?
That's again a big question mark. Typically, the Kurdish constituencies' turnout rates have been higher in Turkish elections than the predominantly Turkish Western province settlers. So in that sense, I don't expect that to be to change drastically. Of course, there are different scenarios that could play out. One is that the leadership of the Kurdish party, HDP, could actually, behind the scenes, call for a boycott of the elections. That has not been voiced yet, but that would have an effect on their own constituency. The other one would be some kind of security concerns on the part of not only the rural but also the urban southeastern Anatolia constituencies. In the last few months at least, that security concern appears to have been dealt with, and we don't hear much of security violations in the region. Yet, a third option would be that the interest in the outcome of the constitutional amendments might be very low, and the overall turnout might be very low. So in the past elections, turnout rate in Turkish elections have been quite high. However, in the presidential election, when there was only going to be one winner and the rest will be losers, the turnout rate went down below 80%. And in this referendum vote, we again will have up or down for the amendments. Therefore, people will have to make a judgment as to the extent to which there is a likelihood that the yes and no vote will be very close to one another. If their perception is that there is a big gap between the yes vote and the no vote, then the no vote sayers will not turn out to vote. If no vote sayers are confident that they are above a certain vote, then the yay sayers will not turn out. So these are all at play at the moment, and that's why I think polling results, as we approach the election day, referendum day, will be much more questionable, and not questionable, much more debated.
Professor Çarkoğlu, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
You're very welcome.
Meral Akşener, a former Istanbul MP of the far-right Nationalist Movement Party, also known as MHP, you may have heard during our conversation with Professor Çarkoğlu, visited our studio this week. Meral Akşener is among the 4 MHP members who ran for the party's leadership last year. Shortly after the race, Akşener and 2 other fellow party members were expelled from MHP. Akşener, along with the other dissidents inside MHP, started a no campaign titled Turkish Nationalists Say No. Now we'll hear Akşener's comments on the upcoming referendum.
Hayır oyu gelecek.
Certain sections of the society that we wouldn't expect will vote no. In the post, it's asked whether the respondents will vote no or yes in the referendum. Those who will vote no are so decisive that they don't fear saying no. They say no, and they have various reasons. However, those who say yes are not able to put forward solid arguments. In Turkey, the yes voters constitute 30% to 37% of total voters. On the other hand, I argue that 80 to 90% of the swing voters will vote no when they go to the ballot box. They have fears because saying no is too risky. When we look at their profile, they are high school or university graduates, most of them are public servants, or they work in large corporations. Even if they are not senior executives, they work as engineers, for example. They are afraid of losing their jobs and positions.
Figen Yüksekdağ, the co-leader of the pro-Kurdish People's Democratic Party, also known as HDP, lost her seat in the parliament. Yüksekdağ's status as a member of the parliament was withdrawn after her conviction of charges on terrorist propaganda. Currently, there are 13 HDP MPs in prison. Now we'll hear the comments made by Mithat Sancar, another HDP MP, on the recent developments and the imprisonment of his fellow MPs.
HDP co-chair Figen Yüksekdağ, who is held in custody, has been convicted of engaging in terrorist propaganda. She has lost her seat in the Turkish parliament following the verdict. Yüksekdağ's biography on the Turkish parliament's website was immediately removed after the decision, with her name transferred instead to the list of former deputies. The 2 co-chairs of HDP were both arrested in November 2016 on other terrorism-related charges after their parliamentary immunity was lifted last March. Selahattin Demirtaş, HDP's other co-chair, was sentenced on February 23rd to 5 months in prison. on charges of denigrating the Turkish nation, the Turkish Republic, and the institutions of the state. The HDP recently applied to the European Court of Human Rights regarding the continued arrest of its co-chairs. So far, 13 HDP legislators, including co-chair Selahattin Demirtas, as well as many mayors and municipality officials, remain under arrest, facing hundreds of years in jail over alleged links to the PKK. The number of the HDP deputies in the parliament has been reduced to 58 after Yüksekdağ's removal. However, the party continues to be the third largest in the parliament after the ruling AKP with 317 seats and the main opposition CHP with 134 seats. On this matter, the HDP deputy Mithat Sancar made the following comments to Ruşen Çakır.
Yaptığım açıklamalarda altını çizdiğim bir husus var.
There is an important point that I have underlined in the previous statements I have made. The stage that we are heading towards right now is de facto party closure. For the government, legal closure is a more problematic procedure. Actually, let's say the power apparatus as a whole, as it is not only the government we are talking about, but also the president. For the power apparatus, the legal procedure is more difficult because the general prosecutor of the Supreme Court of Appeal needs to open a case to close down a political party. Then the case will go to the Constitutional Court, the Constitutional Court will evaluate the case and reach a decision, and so on. Legal party closure is also problematic due to the multilateral agreements and institutions to which Turkey is a part. It can spark much harsher criticisms. In my opinion, they are trying to close down the party without taking the official path, and we will do whatever we can democratically and legally to stop this from happening.
Now we'll hear the latest developments regarding Turkey's involvement in Syria and northern Iraq.
In northern Syria and northern Iraq, the battle against ISIS continues at full steam. In northern Syria, efforts to take control over the city of Al-Bab are coming to an end. Today, Turkish military officials announced that Turkish armed forces and allied Syrian fighters have seized near full control of the key town of Al-Bab in northern Syria. The recapture of Al-Bab by the Turkish military forces and the Free Syrian Army after a prolonged 3-month battle is a major development in the fight against ISIS. On the other end, this advance came with casualties. 2 Turkish soldiers have been killed in an ISIS suicide attack in Syria's Al-Bab, Prime Minister Binali Yıldırım said today. Prime Minister said 2 soldiers were killed in the attack, while there were also wounded soldiers. Moreover, today, more than 60 people have been killed in an ISIS suicide bombing near the Syrian city of Al-Bab just a day after militants were driven from the area. A pickup truck loaded with explosives was detonated as it drove towards a security office where civilians were gathering to organize their return to their homes. Furthermore, the operation of Mosul still continues. Yesterday, the US-backed Iraqi security forces closing in on the ISIS-held western half of Mosul have stormed the city's airport and a nearby military base. Concerning the recent developments in the region and the relations between Turkey and Iraq, an important meeting will be held this weekend. In his upcoming visit to Turkey on Sunday, the President of Kurdistan region, Mesut Barzani, is going to discuss a range of questions with the President of Turkey, Recep Tayyip Erdoğan, including the economy and border security. Presidential spokesman İbrahim Kalın underlined that Ankara and Erbil have a mutual and common goal in the region. Arzu Yılmaz, assistant professor at the American University of Kurdistan, evaluated the position of Turkey in northern Iraq for Medyascope.
Regarding the existence of Turkey in northern Iraq, rumor has it that Turkey plans to build a military base in Zumar after Bashika. Why is this important? When the Western Mosul operation started, presidential spokesperson İbrahim Kalın made a statement about Turkey's doubts about Tel Afar. Zumwalt is strategically located between Talafer and Şengal and surrounded by Haçlı Şabi. When we mention Talafer and Haçlı Şabi, we need to consider the relations between Turkey and Iran. Turkey wanted to participate in the Mosul operation, but it didn't happen. But as we are getting closer to the end of the Mosul operation, Turkey wants to build a military base in Zumwalt to position itself against a possible case of Iranian influence. We should not forget that this position is also important for the PKK in Şengal. Why is this important for the Kurdistan regional government? For a long time, the Kurdistan regional government has wanted to create a secure zone in its southern border. By shifting the Mosul operation to the east, the Kurdistan regional government has consolidated this zone. The Zumwalt base can also help the regional government to secure its southern border.
Last week, the US-based think tank Council on Foreign Relations published a report on Turkish-American relations titled Reconciling Turkey-US Interests in Northern Syria. This week, Medyascope interviewed Aaron Steen, who is a resident fellow at the Atlantic Council and also the writer of the report. We asked him why he thinks that the reinitiation of the negotiations between Turkey and the PKK is vital for securing US interests in northern Syria.
I want to caveat by saying that I'm a student of Turkish domestic politics, know how difficult this is. But for me, everything that I've just discussed is tactical. Whatever we decide, even if we go with the Turkish plan, which I don't think the U.S. will do, it's still tactical. In that you have a very long front line between essentially Syrian PKK and Turkish ground forces all along the Turkish border, and then jutting into Syria as far south as Al-Bab. This is inherently destabilizing for Turkey, and it's inherently destabilizing for the future of Syria. And so therefore, what are you going to do about it? Stop focusing on tactics. Taking a city is easy. It's just a matter of putting in enough military hardware to do it. It's tactically straightforward. Strategically, though, what do you do with the city after it falls? And the U.S. is going to hand Iraq over to the SDF. And then you're going to have very tense relations with Turkey. And so you may be able to mitigate conflict the next year, maybe a couple months. But what's to prevent Turkey invading 2 years from now? Which will cause a lot of problems for U.S. foreign policy as we try and pivot away from Syria. So my solution is to get out in front of this problem and go to what was Turkey's original strategy for Syria. This is a Turkish policy, which is to manage problems in Syria. First and foremost, you try and control the opposition on the Arab side, and on the Kurdish side, you try and take the PKK card away by engaging in peace negotiations. I think the U.S. needs to give Turkey a push.
Tensions between Turkey and Iran are on the rise. After a war of statements between state officials, Iran summoned the Turkish ambassador in Tehran. We'll hear more details from Ömer Taşpınar.
The tension between two countries was triggered with the remarks made by Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan on Persian nationalism during his visit on Bahrain on February 14th. Erdogan criticized Iran and said,
"Some people want both Iraq and Syria to be divided. There is Persian nationalism at work there, and this Persian nationalism is trying to divide the country."
Short after Erdogan's speech, the Foreign Ministry of Iran responded to Turkey with a statement emphasizing that Iran's priority is to establish security and stability in the region. Last weekend, Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Çavuşoğlu, who spoke at the Munich Security Conference, criticized Iran for pursuing sectarian policies and creating instability in the region. Çavuşoğlu said,
"Iran wants to make Syria and Iraq Shia. Turkey is very much against any kind of division, religious or sectarian."
Spokesman of the Foreign Ministry of Iran, Bahram Kasemi, responded to Çavuşoğlu by accusing Turkey of creating instability and insecurity in the region. On the same day, Iran summoned the Turkish ambassador in Tehran to the Foreign Ministry of Iran. Spokesman of the Turkish Ministry of Foreign Affairs, Hüseyin Müftüoğlu, responded to Kasemi the next day.
What is expected from Iran is to take constructive steps and review its regional policies rather than accusing countries that solely express their criticisms of these policies.
Müftüoğlu said. The war of words between the two neighbors has not yet stopped. Ali Akbar Velayati, former foreign minister and incumbent advisor to Iranian Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei, said in a press meeting,
Turkey has failed to meet any of its objectives on Syria and never will.
In a press conference, Turkish presidential spokesperson Ibrahim Kalın responded to Velayati by stating that Turkey would not ignore Iran's efforts in penetrating the region. The tensions between Turkey and Iran have also affected economic relations between the two countries. Turkey's Foreign Economic Relations Board cancelled the Turkish-Iranian Business Forum, which would have been organized this weekend in Tehran. Ömer Taşpınar, non-resident senior fellow at Brookings Institute and adjunct professor at Johns Hopkins University, commented on the ongoing tensions between Iran and Turkey for Medyascope.
The actions of Turkey aim to please the US, but we should also take the Gulf countries and Saudi Arabia into consideration. Saudi Arabia is not happy with Turkey's current Syria policy. Turkey is negotiating with Russia and Iran and agrees that Bashar Assad remains in his seat. I see Turkey's actions towards Iran as a balancing policy. Relations with the US are important, but there is also a regional dimension. Turkey needs to balance its relations with Saudi Arabia, especially its economic relations. Turkey needs to make statements more favorable to Saudi Arabia to convince them to invest in big projects. Relations with Iran have a delicate balance. Iran is a rival for Turkey, but it's not an enemy. Turkey tries not to treat Iran as an enemy, but they are open rivals in the region. Also, the AKP has an Islamist base, so a sectarian dimension comes into play. This government wants to make statements in the name of Islam and Sunnis in the region. Iran doesn't like this, but the paradox is that Turkey actually does what Iran wants. Turkey now supports Assad and has changed its Syria policy. When we try to understand where exactly they have a strategic disagreement, we cannot see much. The problem stems from the US and partly from Saudi Arabia.
The government and the central bank have been trying to introduce measures to prevent the Turkish lira from losing value. Now we'll hear Atilla Yeşilada, who is a political consultant at Global Source Partners.
The government and the central bank are not doing anything to decrease inflation. The inflation rate is very high in Turkey. The effective interest rate, the interest rate which is important for the people and the banks, rose from 8.20 to 10.30. It has increased by 2.5%. So what does this mean? For the foreign investors, interest rates in Turkey are really attractive. The average bond yield in developing countries is 8.5. The bond yield for 2-year bonds in Turkey is 11.5, and that is why people come to Turkey to make money. The other measures are also populist decisions. For example, until May, the rediscount credits provided to exporters will be paid in Turkish liras. Exporters will pay back this credit with a lower exchange rate. Thus, the state subsidizes them. We believe that there is at least $4 billion of credit to be paid this way. Exporters will pay in Turkish liras. They have dollars in their hands and they need to sell foreign currency to the market. Therefore, the demand for foreign currency will diminish. This is good, but the balance sheet of the central bank will be disrupted. The Turkish central bank's dollar reserves are limited. The net reserve is around $35 billion. We know that this is coming. When the Fed increases interest rates in the US, there will be a cash outflow from Turkey. The central bank will not be able to defend the Turkish lira. Thus, these are palliative treatments. I understand what the government is trying to do, so my criticism is not directed to what they will do until the referendum. Everything is fair in law and elections. They will do what they need to do to win the referendum, but it will have consequences, this is true. The government will not let the Turkish lira lose value until the referendum. But they need luck for this. Right now, there is high demand for the assets of developing countries. People are more focused on the positive side of the Trump administration's agenda, and they ignore possible developments like a trade war. US interest rates are low. The Central Bank of European Union has a negative interest rate, thus for now there is a cash inflow to Turkey. As long as this continues, the Turkish lira will be stable. But I bet these conditions will change in the second half of the year. Then the interest rate of the central bank will not be sufficient, and we will see that these measures will not be adequate. Thus, this is highly possible that the Turkish lira will lose value after the referendum, regardless of the result.
Now let's have a look at the upcoming cultural events in Istanbul.
The If Tomorrow virtual reality exhibition can be seen until the end of this weekend in Bomontiada. The exhibition offers both entertaining and provocative experiences, such as seeing a forest through animals' eyes or experiencing a solitary confinement cell through the eyes of a prisoner. The If Movie Festival's closing party, If Rainbow, will take place on Saturday, February 25th at 9:30 p.m. in Babylon, Bomontiada. The party will celebrate every shade of love with DJ Evrim the Evrim and Mr. Sur, who define their music as a mix of old school techno, 90s Turkish pop, funk and house. Cat Frankie will give a solo performance at Salon İKSV on Saturday, February 25th at 9:30 p.m. The Berlin-based musician's tunes blend the joy of pop music with gloomy lyrics. We are expecting Frankie to impress the audience by using loop machine during her performance. Jake and Dinos Chapman's exhibition, The Futility of Universe, will be in Arter until May 7th. Jake and Dinos Chapman are English brothers who belong to the School of Young British Artists and are well known for their subversive works. Their work points out the violent fetishism in the pioneering works of the Enlightenment by repainting the original engravings of Spanish painter Francisco Goya. Jake and Dinos Chapman are visiting Istanbul for the first time. Seyvez's music party will take place at Click Istanbul on Saturday, February 25th at 11 p.m. To add some vibes to your Saturday night, leave yourself to the sound of Jennifer Cardini. The resident DJ of Rex, one of the oldest clubs in Paris, and the founder of the Correspondent label, brings her sets which mix techno house and indie dance to the city.
This week in football, Fenerbahçe and Osmanlıspor disappointed their fans by getting knocked out of the league. Beşiktaş now remains as the only club representing Turkey at the Europa League. Today's draw matched Olympiacos as the opponent of Beşiktaş. And on to basketball. The EuroLeague continues to thrill Turkish basketball fans as Fenerbahçe scored an important victory against Olympiacos yesterday.
With Fenerbahçe and Osmanlıspor disappointing their fans by getting knocked out in the round of last 32 in Europa League, Beşiktaş is now the only club representing Turkey at the European stage, eliminating their opponents Hapoel Beersheva with a 2-1 win and moving on to the round of 16. According to the draw held in the Swiss city of Nyon today, the opponent of Beşiktaş in the round of 16 is Olympiacos. The ties will be played on 9 in Greece and 16 March in Istanbul. Meanwhile, in Ankara, Osmanlıspor were defeated 3-0 by the Greek club Olympiacos and knocked out in the round of 32 in their maiden season, leaving Beşiktaş as the sole Turkish football team competing in Europe. Fenerbahçe were knocked out by their Russian opponent Krasnodar on Wednesday upon a 1-1 draw in Istanbul. Basketball fans in Istanbul watched a breathtaking game yesterday. In the 32nd week of Turkish Airlines EuroLeague, Fenerbahçe beat the Greek team Olympiacos 67-74 on their home court. The game, whose tickets were sold out a week beforehand, thrilled the spectators. Fenerbahçe scored their 15th victory in their 23rd game and its Greek competitor ended its 3-game series win. The last quarter of the game saw a great strife as Fenerbahçe scored a 50-point series against its rival who had increased the point difference to 11 in the beginning of the quarter. and dropped the score difference to 2 points in the 35th minute. Fenerbahçe left the game with a 67-74 victory.
Thanks for tuning in. See you again next Friday at 9 p.m. Bye.